The air in courtroom 4B was thick with the scent of old paper and quiet desperation. All eyes were on the woman at the plaintiff's table, her face pale, her hand resting protectively on the gentle swell of her pregnancy. A single silent tear traced a path down her cheek as her husband's lawyer painted her as a conniving gold digger. The jury shifted their expressions, a mixture of pity and suspicion. But then her own lawyer, a quiet man, no one had paid much mind, rose to his feet. The room held its breath for his final, desperate plea. Instead, he looked at the judge and delivered a statement so staggering, so utterly unforeseen, that the court proceedings didn't just stop, they froze in time. Anya Davenport believed she was living a fairy tale. At 26, she was married to Ethan Davenport, the charismatic and ruthless CEO of Davenport Capital, a man 15 years her senior, whose name was a regular fixture in the Wall Street Journal. Their home was a sprawling minimalist masterpiece of glass and steel overlooking the cliffs of Malibu, a place so sterile and perfect it often felt more like a museum than a home. Anya, an orphan who had lost her single mother at 19, had been swept off her feet by Ethan's grand gestures, his confident command of every room he entered, and the promise of a security she had never known. For 5 years, she played her part perfectly. She was the gracious hostess, the beautiful accessory at charity galas, the silent admirer of his business acumen. She curated their life with the precision of an art director, ensuring every dinner party, every vacation, every public appearance was flawless. But the gilded poles of her cage were becoming more apparent with each passing day. Ethan's love was conditional, a reward for her compliance. His compliments were transactional, his affection a tool of control. He corrected her choice of dress, her opinions on art, even the friends she tried to keep from her life before him. "Anya, darling," he'd say, his voice a smooth, cold caress that artist is so provincial. Our guests expect a certain level of sophistication. Her friends who worked normal jobs and laughed a little too loudly for Ethan's taste were soon phased out. Her life had been hollowed out and refurnished with his desires. The discovery of her pregnancy was for Anya a beacon of hope. A child, a baby would bring warmth into their cold home. It would be someone she could love unconditionally, someone who would love her back with an untainted heart. It would make them a real family. When she told Ethan, his reaction was muted. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the Pacific as if calculating its net worth. He didn't turn. "Is that so?" he said, his tone flat. "We'll need to hire a new nanny. A proper one. British, perhaps." There was no joy, no shared moment of wonder. There was only logistics. That night, Anya cried herself to sleep, her hand on her still flat stomach, whispering promises to the tiny life inside her. The end came not with a bang, but with the quiet slide of a manila envelope across their marble kitchen island. It was a Tuesday morning. Anya was nauseous, the familiar scent of Ethan's imported Italian coffee turning her stomach. He was dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit, ready for another day of corporate conquest. "Anya," he said, not meeting her eyes, "we need to discuss the terms of our separation." The words didn't register at first. She stared at him, then at the envelope. "Separation. Ethan, what are you talking about?" "I'm pregnant." "I'm aware," he said, finally looking at her. His eyes, the color of cold steel, held no warmth, no regret. "This marriage has run its course. It's a business arrangement that no longer serves my interests." Her world tilted. "A business arrangement? I'm your wife." He gave a short, dismissive laugh. You were a suitable partner, but my needs have evolved. I'm with someone else now. Her name is Isabella Croft. You've met her. From the Sotheby's board. Isabella. Younger, sharper, from a family with old money and even older connections. Anya felt the blood drain from her face. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. The envelope lay on the counter, a silent, lethal serpent. Don't be hysterical, Anya. It's unbecoming, Ethan said, straightening his tie. My lawyers have been very generous. There's a one-time settlement of $250,000. In exchange, you'll sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. You will move out by the end of the month. The child, I'll provide a standard child support stipend, but I will be seeking primary custody. It's better for the child to be raised in a stable, financially secure environment. $250,000. To a normal person, it was a fortune. To Ethan Davenport, it was less than he'd spent on his watch. He was buying her silence, erasing her from his life for the price of a mid-range luxury car. And he was threatening to take her baby. Custody, she whispered, her voice trembling. You can't be serious. I am deadly serious, he replied, his voice dropping to the chillingly calm tone he used in boardrooms just before a hostile takeover. My legal team is the best in the country. Marcus Thorne himself is handling it. Do you really think you stand a chance? Sign the papers, Anya. Take the money and build a quiet life for yourself somewhere. It's the smartest move you can make. He turned and walked out, leaving the envelope on the island. The heavy glass door slid shut behind him with a soft, final thud. Anya sank to the floor, the cold marble seeping through her silk pajamas. The fairy tale was over. She wasn't a princess in a castle. She was a prisoner, and she had just been served her eviction notice. The tears finally came hot and desperate for the life she thought she had, and for the child she would have to fight for, with everything she didn't have. The next few days were a blur of shock and paralyzing fear. Anya was a ghost in her own home, wandering through the vast empty rooms that now felt alien and hostile. The staff, once polite, now moved around her with averted eyes, their loyalty already transferred to the man who signed their paychecks. Ethan was gone, staying at one of his city penthouses with Isabella. He communicated only through brusque emails from his lawyer, Marcus Thorne. Each message was a new turn of the screw, a new pressure tactic designed to make her sign the papers. Anya knew she was outmatched. She had no money of her own. Her bank account was a joint one, and she found to her horror that the balance had been reduced to a mere $5,000, Ethan's calculated allowance for her to move out. He had thought of everything. She couldn't afford a cheap motel, let alone a lawyer capable of standing up to Marcus Thorne, a man known in legal circles as the Shark. Despair was a physical weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. One night, unable to sleep, she found herself in the back of her closet, going through a small, leather-bound box of her mother's things. It was all she had left of her, a few faded photographs, a pressed flower, a handful of letters. Tucked into a side pocket was a worn business card. Julian Croft-esque. Attorney at law, for those who have no voice. Anya vaguely remembered her mother, Elena Hayes, mentioning the name. He was the son of an old family friend, a man who had chosen to practice public interest law instead of joining a lucrative corporate firm. A good man, her mother had said once. He fights for people, not for profits. It was a pathetic long shot, A pro bono lawyer against the Davenport legal machine. It was like bringing a pocket knife to a gunfight. But it was the only shot she had. Her hands shaking, she Googled his name. He was still practicing running a small, unassuming office in a less fashionable part of downtown Los Angeles. The next day, she took an Uber to the address, the fare, eating a significant chunk of her remaining money. The office was on the second floor of a tired brick building above a laundromat. The contrast to Marcus Thorne's high-rise temple of glass and chrome was jarring. The waiting room was small, the furniture clean but worn. A kind-faced woman in her 60s greeted her. Julian Croft emerged a few minutes later. He was nothing like she expected. He was in his late 30s, with thoughtful, intelligent eyes, a slightly rumpled suit, and an air of quiet intensity. He wasn't a showman. He was a listener. He led her into his office, a room overflowing with books and files. He listened to her story for a full hour, without interruption, his gaze never leaving her face. He read the settlement agreement she'd brought, his expression unreadable. When she finished, her voice hoarse from emotion, a heavy silence filled the room. Mr. Davenport is being represented by Marcus Thorne, Julian said. Finally, his voice calm and even. This will be an exceptionally difficult fight. Thorne's strategy is to bleed the opposition dry, to bury them in motions and discovery until they can no longer afford to fight. I know Anya whispered, tears welling in her eyes again. I can't pay you. I have almost nothing. Julian leaned forward, steepling his fingers. He looked at her not with pity, but with a strange, analytical curiosity. You said your mother was Elena Hayes. Anya nodded, surprised. Yes. Did you know her? My father knew her. A long time ago, he said, his eyes distant for a moment. He then refocused on Anya. Tell me about her. About her family. Your grandparents. What do you know about them? The question was bizarre. My grandparents? My mother never spoke of them. She said she was estranged from her family, that they disapproved of her life. She grew up in Europe, I think. She was very private about her past. What was her father's name? Do you know? Julian pressed gently. No. I'm sorry. She never said. She came to America alone and never looked back. Why is this important? Julian didn't answer directly. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. Anya, this is going to sound strange, but I need you to trust me. I will take your case. I will represent you pro bono. But you must follow my instructions to the letter. Do not speak to your husband or his lawyers. Do not sign anything. Forward all communication to me. And be patient. The wheels of justice can turn slowly, but sometimes they grind exceedingly fine. Anya was speechless. He was taking her case. For free. A wave of relief so powerful it made her dizzy washed over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt a pinprick of light in the crushing darkness. Why, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why are you doing this? Julian Croft turned from the window, and for the first time she saw a flicker of something sharp and fierce in his calm eyes. Let's just say, I have a professional interest in cases where powerful men believe they are above the law, and because I believe your mother Eleanor would have wanted someone to fight for you. He was holding something back. She could feel it. A piece of the puzzle was missing. But as she walked out of that small, cluttered office and back into the harsh sunlight, she wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a client. She had a voice, and its name was Julian Croft. The following weeks were a brutal education in psychological warfare. True to Julian's prediction, Marcus Thorne and his team launched a legal onslaught designed to intimidate and exhaust Anya. They filed motions demanding access to her personal diaries, her emails, her text messages from before she even met Ethan. They subpoenaed the few old friends she had, hoping to dig up any shred of information that could be twisted to paint her as unstable or manipulative. Their official narrative, presented in court filings, was cruel and simple. Anya Hayes was a classic gold digger. She had trapped a wealthy, successful man with a surprise pregnancy and was now attempting to extort a fortune from him. They presented Ethan as the victim, a benevolent husband whose generosity was being taken advantage of. Each legal document that arrived via Julian's office was a fresh stab of pain. Anya would read the vicious, calculated lies and feel the fight drain out of her. Ethan, the man she had loved, was actively trying to destroy her character, to leave her with nothing, not even her dignity. Through it all, Julian was a rock. "This is expected, Anya," he would tell her during their brief phone calls. "It's Thorne's playbook. It's noise. Ignore it. Focus on yourself and the baby." His own legal responses were infuriatingly passive to her. He didn't fight fire with fire. He filed quiet procedural counter-motions, requesting extensions, clarifying minor points of law, and generally slowing the process to a crawl. To Anya, it felt like they were losing. "Julian, they're burying us," she said in a panicked call one evening after receiving a motion to compel a psychological evaluation. "They want to prove I'm an unfit mother before the baby is even born." "You have to do something." "I am doing something, Anya," he replied, his voice as steady as ever. "I'm buying us time. Time is the one thing they don't want us to have. Trust the process." What Anya didn't see were Julian's nights. After she went to bed, her mind filled with anxiety, Julian was at his office, surrounded by stacks of old legal tomes, corporate records, and genealogy charts. He wasn't just fighting a divorce case. He was on a treasure hunt, following a trail of breadcrumbs left decades ago. His father, a decent but timid lawyer, had once worked for a man of immense, almost mythical wealth, a reclusive industrialist named Arthur Kensington. Kensington was a genius, a tyrant, and a hermit who had built a global empire in mining and technology. He had one child, a daughter named Eleanor, whom he adored but smothered. When Eleanor fell in love with a penniless musician and fled to America, Kensington's rage was biblical. He cut her off, ordering his staff never to speak her name again. But as Julian's father had confided in him years ago, Arthur Kensington never legally disinherited his daughter. It was a strange oversight, born perhaps of pride, or a secret, stubborn hope that she would one day return. He had his security team track her discreetly, receiving yearly updates on her simple, quiet life. He knew when she died, and he knew she had left behind a child, a granddaughter named Anya. Julian was now piecing together the final parts of this story. He hired a private investigator in Switzerland who confirmed the existence of a labyrinthine series of trusts and holding companies, all leading back to a single, unchangeable directive in Kensington's master will. He discovered that Arthur Kensington, now in his late 90s and in failing health, was living his final days in a secluded estate on Lake Geneva. His entire multi-billion-dollar fortune was designated to flow to his only living direct descendant upon his death. The divorce case was merely the stage. The real drama, the one that would change everything, was unfolding thousands of miles away in the quiet antiseptic room of a dying titan of industry. Julian's strategy wasn't passive, it was predatory. He was waiting, biding his time for the precise moment to strike. The preliminary court date was set. Ethan's team demanded a jury trial, a strategic move to play on public sympathies and paint Anya as a grasping shrew in front of a panel of her peers. The day before the trial was to begin, Julian met with Anya. She was now visibly pregnant, her face etched with worry. "I'm scared, Julian," she confessed. "They'll tear me apart on the stand." Julian looked at her, his expression serious. "They might. And you have to be strong. But I want you to remember something. No matter what they say, no matter how they try to define you, they do not know who you are. Tomorrow, they are going to find out." His words were cryptic, but they held a core of absolute certainty that was for the first time in months contagious. Anya took a deep breath. She didn't understand his plan, but she chose to believe in the man who was fighting for her. She would walk into that courtroom tomorrow, not knowing that she was about to become the epicenter of a legal earthquake. The Honorable Judge Marion Albright presided over courtroom 4B, with an air of no-nonsense authority honed over 30 years on the bench. She had seen every flavor of marital strife, from petty squabbles over china sets to bitter custody battles that scorched the earth. The Davenport divorce, she surmised, would be the latter. Anya sat beside Julian, her hands clasped over her baby bump, as if to shield her child from the toxicity in the room. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, the jury, the press sketch artists, the public spectators. Across the aisle, Ethan sat flanked by his legal team. He looked powerful and composed in a dark navy suit, occasionally whispering to Marcus Thorne with a confident smirk. He refused to look at Anya, his dismissal of her so complete it was a physical force. The morning was a blur of legal maneuvering. Thorne, as expected, was a master performer. He strode before the jury, his voice resonating with theatrical gravitas. He presented a timeline of the marriage carefully constructed to portray Anya as an opportunist. He highlighted Ethan's generosity, the cars, the jewelry, the lavish lifestyle she had enjoyed. This was a woman who came from nothing. Thorne declared, gesturing towards Anya without looking at her. And my client, Mr. Ethan Davenport, gave her everything. A home, a life of comfort and security. And how does she repay this kindness by attempting to leverage her pregnancy in a shameless cash grab? Julian's cross-examinations were brief and pointed, but they felt like chipping away at a mountain with a teaspoon. The jury's faces were hard to read, but Anya could feel the narrative taking hold. She was the villain of the story. The climax came in the afternoon, during Thorne's closing arguments for this preliminary phase, where he would present their final generous offer before the full trial proceeded. He portrayed Ethan as a man of reason, and Anya as the irrational, emotional party. Despite the clear evidence of opportunism, Thorne boomed his voice, dripping with condescension. Mr. Davenport, in his infinite goodwill, wishes to see the mother of his future child provided for. He is therefore making a final non-negotiable offer. He paused for dramatic effect. A lump sum payment of $500,000 and a monthly child support stipend of $20,000. A fortune for any normal person. All we ask in return is that Mrs. Davenport relinquish her spurious claims and agree to a custody arrangement that prioritizes the child's well-being in a stable environment. He was offering more money, but the sting was in the subtext, take the cash, give us the child, and disappear. It was the final calculated cruelty. All the months of fear, humiliation, and loneliness coalesced into a single point of unbearable pressure behind Anya's eyes. She couldn't stop it. A single tear broke free and traced a hot, silent path down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but it was too late. The jury saw it. Thorne saw it and gave a subtle, satisfied nod. The image was perfect, the weeping, defeated woman. Then Julian Croft stood up. He was the picture of calm. He walked not to the jury, but to the center of the courtroom, directly before Judge Albright's bench. The room grew quiet, expecting a final, perhaps desperate, rebuttal. "Mr. Croft," the judge prompted. Julian nodded respectfully. "Your Honor, we thank Mr. Thorne for his performance, and we categorically reject his client's offer." A murmur went through the room. Ethan leaned forward, his confident smirk faltering into a frown of annoyance. "My client, Anya Davenport, will not be accepting a single dollar of Mr. Davenport's money." Julian continued, his voice clear and steady, cutting through the silence. "Not now, not ever. For a very simple reason. She doesn't need it." Thorne let out a small, derisive scoff. "Your Honor, is this going somewhere?" "Oh, it is." "Mr. Thorne," Julian said, turning his head slightly to look at the opposing counsel. "It's going somewhere you could never have anticipated in your most creative legal filings." He turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I have just been authorized by my associates in Geneva to unseal and present new information that is critically material to this case. Information that fundamentally alters my client's standing, not just in this courtroom, but in the world." Judge Albright leaned forward, intrigued. "Proceed, Counselor. But this had better be relevant." "It is the only thing that is relevant," Julian said. He took a deep breath, and the entire courtroom seemed to lean in with him. "For the past several months, Mr. Thorne has worked tirelessly to paint my client as a gold digger, a woman of no means desperate for a piece of the Davenport fortune. The premise of their entire case is that she is financially dependent and therefore motivated by greed." Julian paused, letting the statement hang in the air. He then looked directly at a confused and anxious Anya, giving her a small, reassuring nod, before turning back to the bench. "Your Honor," he declared, his voice ringing with a power no one in the room knew he possessed, as of 700 a.m., Central European Time. "This morning, a man named Arthur Kensington passed away peacefully in his home on Lake Geneva. The name meant nothing to most people in the room. But Ethan Davenport, a man who tracked global wealth, stiffened. His eyes widened slightly. He knew that name." Julian continued, his voice building. "Arthur Kensington was a notoriously private man, but he was also the founder and sole owner of Kensington Global, one of the largest privately held industrial conglomerates on the planet. And he had one child, a daughter named Eleanor, who he was estranged from. That daughter moved to America, changed her name to Eleanor Hayes, and passed away 7 years ago." Anya's breath caught in her throat. Eleanor Hayes. Her mother. Julian's eyes found Ethan's across the courtroom, holding his shocked gaze. Eleanor Hayes had one child, a daughter, Mr. Kensington's only living direct descendant. According to his ironclad and irrevocable last will and testament, which was authenticated by Swiss authorities, not 3 hours ago his entire estate passes to her. Julian turned from the judge and made a slow, deliberate gesture towards the plaintiff's table where Anya sat. Frozen her face a mask of utter disbelief. "So you see, Your Honor, This case is built on a lie. My client is not a penniless gold digger. As of this morning, she is the sole legal heiress to the Kensington global industrial fortune, an estate valued conservatively at $3.7 billion. Silence. Not just silence. It was a vacuum, a complete and total cessation of sound, of movement, of breath. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keys. The jury members stared, their mouths agape. Marcus Thorne's face had gone slack, the colour draining from it. Judge Albright's jaw had literally dropped. And Ethan Davenport looked as though he had been struck by lightning. The smugness, the confidence, the power, all of it evaporated in an instant, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated, horrified shock. The court was frozen, and in the centre of the silent, spinning world, Anya Davenport looked from Julian to the judge, to the husband who had tried to cast her aside like trash, the single tear on her cheek. Now evidence not of weakness, but of a life so profoundly and irrevocably changed that no one in that room could yet comprehend it. The spell was broken by a loud gasp from a woman in the jury box. That single sound opened the floodgates. The courtroom erupted into a cacophony of frantic whispers, shuffling feet, and the frantic scratching of reporters' pens. Judge Albright slammed her gavel down, the sharp cracks barely piercing the rising chaos. "Order, order in this court," she commanded, her voice regaining its steel. "Councillors into my chambers. Now this court is in recess for 1 hour." Julian calmly gathered his papers, walked over to Anya, and gently touched her shoulder. She was trembling, her eyes wide and uncomprehending. "Billion," she whispered the word dying on her lips. "Breathe, Anya," Julian said softly. "Just breathe. I'll explain everything." He guided her out a side door, shielding her from the swarm of reporters who were already trying to surge forward. In the stark quiet of the judge's chambers, the reality began to sink in. Judge Albright sat behind her large desk, her expression a mixture of stern professionalism and undisguised astonishment. A few minutes later, a pale and shaken Marcus Thorne entered, followed by a stone-faced Ethan Davenport. The swagger was gone. He looked smaller, diminished. Mr. Croft, the judge, began, her voice low and serious. "You had better not be playing games in my courtroom. Is what you claimed out there the truth?" "It is, Your Honor," Julian said, placing a freshly printed and notarized document on her desk. "This is a certified communication from the executors of the Kensington estate in Zurich. They have been trying to locate my client for years. My father's old case files gave me a place to start. The timing of Mr. Kensington's death was providential." As Julian laid out the stunning truth, Anya listened, as if in a dream. Her mother, Eleanor, was the runaway daughter of a reclusive billionaire. Her entire life, her mother had worked as a librarian, raising Anya in a tiny, love-filled apartment, instilling in her values of kindness and humility. She had never once hinted at the world she had left behind. Why, Anya asked Julian, her voice choked with emotion. Why did she never tell me? "I believe she wanted to protect you," Julian said gently. "She ran away from that world of suffocating wealth and control to have a real life. She wanted you to grow up without the weight of the Kensington name. To be normal. In her own way, she gave you a gift." Ethan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice strained. "Anya, I had no idea." He took a step towards her, his face a mask of feigned sincerity. We need to talk. This changes everything. Our family. Anya flinched, as if he had tried to strike her. The fog of shock was beginning to clear, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This man hadn't cared about their family when he served her divorce papers. He hadn't cared when he tried to take her child. He only cared now, when she had suddenly become more powerful than him. "Don't," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "Don't you dare talk to me about family." Marcus Thorne, seeing his client's pathetic attempt, stepped in. "Your Honor, in light of this unprecedented development, we request a stay to re-evaluate our position." "You do that, Mr. Thorne," Judge Albright said, her gaze sharp. "Because from where I'm sitting, your entire case just evaporated. The allegation that Mrs. Davenport is motivated by financial gain is now frankly ludicrous." She looked from Ethan's desperate face to Anya's newly composed one. The power in the room had not just shifted, it had undergone a tectonic reversal. When they left the chambers, the courthouse hallway was a media circus. Flashbulbs went off like strobing lightning. "Mrs. Davenport, is it true, Anya? How does it feel?" Ethan tried to reach for her arm to present a united front for the cameras. "Anya, please." Anya pulled away from him, her expression one of deep, settled disgust. Guided by Julian, she pushed through the throng without a word, her silence more powerful than any statement she could have made. Back in Julian's modest office, the reality of her new life began to set in. Her phone was buzzing incessantly with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Financial advisors long lost, family friends, wealth managers, the vultures were already circling. Julian calmly unplugged the phone. "You'll need a team to handle this," he said. "A good one. We'll build it together. People we can trust." "I don't know who to trust," Anya confessed, sinking into a chair. "Julian, my entire life has been a lie. My mother." "Your mother loved you," he finished for her. "She gave you a life of genuine love, not of privilege. Arthur Kensington left you his money, but your mother left you your character. Don't ever forget which one is more valuable." That night, for the first time, Anya didn't sleep in the guest room of a friend's house. A discreet security team, arranged by the Kensington estate executors, moved her into a suite at the Peninsula Hotel under an assumed name. As she looked out over the glittering cityscape of Los Angeles, she felt a profound sense of dislocation. She was no longer just Anya. She was the Kensington heiress. The world would never look at her the same way again. And as for Ethan Davenport, she realized with a chilling certainty he had not just divorced his wife. He had discarded a queen, and he had no idea what kind of reign was about to begin. The news of the billionaire heiress in courtroom 4B spread like wildfire. It was on every news channel, every blog, every financial gossip column. The Davenport divorce, from gold digger to tycoon. The narrative had been flipped on its head. Suddenly, Ethan wasn't the powerful victim. He was the world's biggest fool. The man who had it all had thrown away the one thing that would have cemented his place in the global elite forever. His world began to unravel with astonishing speed. The board of Davenport Capital, already wary of his arrogant leadership style, grew nervous. His affair with Isabella Croft, now public, was seen not as a private matter, but as a catastrophic lapse in judgment. Lenders grew cautious. Business partners started hedging their bets. The predator had suddenly become prey, and the sharks of Wall Street could smell blood in the water. Ethan, in his panic, did the only thing he knew how to do. He tried to acquire. he launched a full-scale campaign to win Anya back. The first day, a forest of white orchids, Anya's favorite, arrived at her hotel. They were sent back. The next day, a courier delivered a velvet box containing the North Star diamond, a flawless blue diamond necklace worth millions. It was returned with a curt note from Julian's office. Then came the desperate phone calls and emails, not just to Anya, but to Julian. "This is all a misunderstanding," he pleaded in a voicemail. "I love Anya. The stress of the business. I wasn't thinking clearly. We can fix this. We can build an Emma together for our child." Anya listened to the message with Julian, her expression unreadable. When it was finished, she simply said, "Delete it." Under Julian's guidance, she was moving with a speed and decisiveness that surprised everyone, most of all herself. The timid, tearful woman from the courtroom was gone, replaced by someone forged in the crucible of betrayal and shock. She was no longer reacting. She was acting. First, she withdrew her original divorce petition. Then she filed a new one. This time, she was the plaintiff, and the grounds were not irreconcilable differences, but emotional cruelty and infidelity. She wasn't asking for a single cent of his money. The petition made that explicitly clear. What she demanded was far more damaging to a man like Ethan. She demanded a full and public apology for the slanderous accusations made against her. She demanded sole legal and physical custody of their unborn child, citing his morally bankrupt character and his attempt to use the child as a bargaining chip. His visitation rights, the petition stated, would be minimal and supervised pending the results of a court-ordered psychological evaluation, the very tactic he had tried to use on her. Finally, she demanded that he cover all her legal fees, not because she needed the money, but as a matter of principle. It was a declaration of war, fought not with financial claims, but with moral authority. Marcus Thorne, reading the new filing, reportedly threw it across his office. His case was in shambles. There was no defense. How could he argue that Anya was unfit when Ethan's own behavior was now a matter of public record and ridicule? Ethan was apoplectic. He tried to confront Anya at her hotel, but was blocked by her new, highly efficient security detail. He was photographed arguing with the guards, his face red and contorted with rage, an image that splashed across the tabloids the next day, further cementing his reputation as an unstable bully. Anya, meanwhile, was shielded from the chaos. Julian had assembled a small, fiercely loyal team. A seasoned estate lawyer, a pragmatic financial advisor, and a discreet public relations expert. They met not in boardrooms, but in the quiet of Anya's suite. They were helping her understand the sheer scale of the Kensington Empire mines in Australia, tech patents in Asia, real estate in London. It was overwhelming, but with each briefing, Anya felt a new sense of purpose growing within her. This wasn't just money. It was a legacy. It was power. And she was determined to wield it in a way that would have made her mother proud. The final meeting with Ethan took place not in a courtroom, but in a neutral conference room at Julian's law firm. Ethan came alone this time, his lawyers waiting outside. He looked tired and defeated. The sharp edges of his arrogance had been worn down. "Anya," he began, his voice soft. "I'm sorry. For everything." Anya looked at him, her gaze clear and steady. She saw him now for what he was. A hollow man, defined only by his wealth and his power over others. With her, he had no power. Her new fortune was an impenetrable shield. "Are you sorry for what you did, Ethan?" she asked quietly. "Or are you sorry that you got caught? Are you sorry you tried to destroy me? Or are you just sorry you found out I was the one person you couldn't afford to make an enemy of?" He had no answer. "I will accept your signature on the divorce settlement as my apology," she said, sliding the papers across the table. "You will stay away from me. You will stay away from my child. Perhaps one day, if you can prove you are a changed man, you can be a part of her life. But you will have to earn it. The days of you taking whatever you want are over." He stared at the papers at the woman before him. She was no longer the soft, malleable girl he had married. She was a queen, calm and absolute in her power. Defeated, he picked up the pen and signed his name. Surrendering everything he had fought for, realizing too late that in his greed to secure his kingdom, he had lost the entire world. 6 months later, the world of Anya Hayes was unrecognizable. The divorce was a quiet, finalized affair. Ethan Davenport, stripped of his dignity and a significant portion of his company's value, due to the scandal, had retreated from public life. He was a cautionary tale, whispered about at cocktail parties, a fallen titan. Anya, however, was just beginning her ascent. She gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl with a full head of dark hair. She named her Eleanor. Holding her daughter in her arms in the private, sun-drenched room of the maternity ward, Anya felt a sense of peace she had never known. All the chaos, the betrayal, and the shocking revelations had led to this perfect, quiet moment. This was what mattered. She did not move into a Malibu mansion or a Park Avenue penthouse. Instead, she purchased a sprawling but understated historical home in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in Pasadena, a place that felt warm and full of life. It was a home for a family, not a showcase for wealth. The weight of the Kensington name and fortune was immense, but Anya refused to be defined by it. She spent months with her team of advisors learning every facet of the empire her grandfather had built. She was a quick study with an intuitive grasp of the human element behind the balance sheets. She saw that Kensington Global was a powerful engine, but it lacked a soul. She decided to give it one. Her first major act as the head of the company was not an acquisition or a corporate restructuring, but the creation of the Elena Hayes Foundation, a philanthropic organization endowed with an initial $5 billion of the Kensington fortune. Its mission was simple and drawn directly from the values her mother had taught her, to provide support for those who had no voice. The foundation's first initiatives were deeply personal. It established a network of shelters for women and children, fleeing abusive situations, providing not just safety, but legal aid, job training, and psychological support. It created a massive scholarship fund for underprivileged students, focusing on those like her mother who chose the arts and humanities. And its flagship project was the Julian Croft Center for Justice, a national organization dedicated to funding and supporting public interest lawyers who fought for the common good, ensuring that no one would ever have to face a legal battle alone, simply because they couldn't afford it. Anya herself did not retreat into a private life of quiet philanthropy. She became the face of her foundation, a reluctant but powerful public figure. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but carried the immense weight of her story and her resources. She wasn't the glamorous socialite Ethan had tried to mold her into. She was something far more formidable, a woman of substance, purpose, and immense power, used not for self-aggrandizement, but for genuine change. One sunny afternoon, she was sitting on a blanket in her garden, her daughter Elena babbling happily beside her. Julian Croft, now a trusted friend, and the chairman of her foundation's advisory board, sat with her going over some documents. "The first round of grants from the Center for Justice went out last week," he said, smiling. "We've already funded 37 lawyers across the country." Anya looked at him, her heart full. "My mother would have liked that," she said, softly. She looked down at her daughter, who was reaching for a bright yellow flower. She saw her own mother's eyes, her own resilience, and the untainted promise of a new beginning. She had been tested in the most brutal of ways, stripped of everything she thought she knew, only to discover a strength she never realized she had, and a legacy she never expected. She was not Anya Davenport, the discarded wife. She was not even Anya Kensington, the billionaire heiress. She was Anya Hayes Eleanor's daughter and Elena's mother. She had found her own name, her own voice, and her own purpose. And her story, the real story, was just beginning. 3 years passed. The world that had been violently upended found a new quiet equilibrium. Anya's life took on a rhythm that was both demanding and deeply fulfilling. Her daughter Eleanor was a vibrant, curious toddler, her laughter the true north of Anya's existence. Their Pasadena home was a sanctuary of warmth and normalcy, a world away from the astronomical sums discussed in boardrooms and foundation meetings. Anya had proven to be a surprisingly adept leader. She had a quiet intelligence and an empathy that, when combined with the vast resources at her command, made for a potent force. The Elena Hayes Foundation was a global success, celebrated for its tangible impact. Yet Anya knew that philanthropy alone was not enough. To truly honor the full scope of her legacy, she had to engage with the colossal complex machine her grandfather had built, Kensington Global. For decades, the company had operated under a simple, ruthless philosophy: profit above all. It was a titan of the old world, with a reputation for aggressive tactics and an almost sociopathic disregard for its environmental and human impact. Anya, guided by Julian and a new team of progressive advisors, began the slow, monumental task of turning the supertanker. She started pushing for sustainable practices in their mining operations, investing in green technology, and implementing fair labor policies in their overseas factories. This did not go unnoticed. The old guard, the men who had been Arthur Kensington's lieutenants for half a century, watched from the shadows with growing disapproval. They saw her not as a leader, but as a naive girl, playing with her inheritance, dismantling a perfectly efficient engine of wealth to appease her conscience. The first shot was fired in the pages of the Financial Times. A lengthy, meticulously researched article appeared profiling the new direction of Kensington Global. It was a masterful piece of character assassination, quoting numerous anonymous senior sources who lamented the company's decline under its new, unfocused and sentimental leadership. The article painted Anya as a dilettante, more interested in charity photo ops than in shareholder value, a trust fund activist who was eroding the very foundations of her grandfather's empire. The article was a declaration of war. Julian's team quickly traced the source of the coordinated leaks to one man, Alastair Finch. Finch was in his late 70s, a hawk-faced man with eyes like chips of granite. He had been Arthur Kensington's COO for 40 years, the man who had translated the founder's tyrannical vision into reality. He had been respectfully retired when Anya took over, but he had never relinquished his influence. To him, Kensington Global was not Anya's birthright. It was his life's work. "He's rallying the board," Julian told Anya in her sunlit home office, little Elena's finger paintings taped to the wall behind her. "The members loyal to him see you as a temporary custodian. They think you can be pushed aside." Anya looked out the window at her daughter, who was chasing a butterfly on the lawn. A cold resolve settled over her. She had fought for her child, for her freedom. Now she would have to fight for her legacy. "Then I'm going to London," she said, her voice calm and firm. "I'm calling a special meeting of the board. It's time they meet the woman who is actually in charge." The Kensington Global Boardroom in London was a chamber designed to intimidate. The walls were panelled in dark, ancient wood. The air was heavy with the scent of leather and tradition, and a massive portrait of a scowling Arthur Kensington loomed over the head of the 20-foot-long mahogany table. Anya walked in, not in a power suit, but in a simple, elegant dress, the lone woman in a room of 15 grey-haired men in dark suits. Alistair Finch sat opposite her, his posture ramrod straight, his expression one of undisguised contempt. He began the meeting not with pleasantries, but with a direct assault. "Ms. Hayes." He began dispensing with the formality of her married name. "We have watched as you have systematically undermined the core principles that made this company the giant it is. Arthur Kensington built this empire on strength, on shrewd calculation, and on an unsentimental focus on the bottom line. You are diverting billions into frivolous social projects and strangling our most profitable divisions with so-called ethical regulations. You are turning a lion into a lamb, and for that you will be devoured by the market." A murmur of agreement went around the table. Anya let the silence settle her gaze, sweeping over each man, before it landed on Finch. "Thank you for your candor, Alistair," she said, her voice perfectly even. The use of his first name was a subtle power play, and he flinched almost imperceptibly. "You invoke my grandfather's name as if you are the sole keeper of his vision. You are mistaken. You were his employee. I am his blood." She stood up and walked to the head of the table, turning on a large screen behind her. "You speak of strength and the bottom line. Let's talk about them." What followed was not an emotional plea, but a brilliant data-driven dissection of Finch's archaic worldview. She presented market analysis, showing the rapidly growing multi-trillion-dollar market for ESG environmental, social, and governance investing. She displayed charts showing that their new ethical policies had already reduced legal liabilities and insurance premiums by 9%. She showed them internal reports revealing that their investment in employee wellness had cut attrition by half, saving the company hundreds of millions in recruitment and training costs. "My grandfather," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "was a genius because he saw the world as it was and anticipated where it was going. He built an empire for the 20th century. Clinging to his exact methods now is not loyalty. It's corporate malpractice. You accuse me of sentimentality. I accuse you of nostalgia. You are driving by looking in the rear-view mirror." She looked directly at Alistair Finch. "You mistake kindness for weakness. You see the foundation as a drain, when in fact it is our greatest asset. It is the face of a new Kensington Global One that can attract the best young talent. One that governments want to work with, one that customers are proud to buy from. You built a fortress, Alistair. I am building a future." She turned back to the board. "The world is changing. You can either change with it under my leadership, or you can become a fossil, a relic of a bygone era, clutching a portrait of a man who would be the first to call you a fool for not adapting." The room was silent. The board members looked from the data on the screen to Anya's resolute face, and then to the suddenly small-looking Alistair Finch. They were businessmen. They understood numbers, risk, and the changing winds of capital. In that moment, they saw not a naive girl, but a visionary. They saw Arthur Kensington's true heir. Anya had won. She had walked into the lion's den and proven she was the one with the sharpest teeth. As she flew back to California that night, high above the clouds, she looked at a photo of Elena on her phone. She was fighting not just to protect an empire, but to build a world worthy of her daughter. She had fully integrated the two sides of her being, the compassionate heart of Eleanor Hayes and the formidable mind of Arthur Kensington, and the world was about to see what a woman like that could build. Anya's journey from a courtroom of tears to a boardroom of influence is a powerful testament to the fact that our true worth is never defined by others. She was branded a gold digger by a man who only understood value in terms of dollars, only for the world to discover that her hidden legacy was greater than his could ever be. But her ultimate victory wasn't the money she inherited. It was the purpose she chose. She transformed a story of personal betrayal into a public mission of hope and justice, honoring the humble mother who gave her everything that truly mattered. Her story is a reminder that the most profound reversals of fortune happen not in our bank accounts, but in our spirit. If this story of resilience and unexpected justice moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true-life, dramatic stories that will leave you breathless. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update. The air in the Davenport mansion always smelled of old money and secrets, a cloying mix of lemon polish and century-old regret. For Celestine Duval, 5 months pregnant and blissfully in love, it had smelled like home. But that illusion shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't the sound of her husband's laughter from the grand study that broke her heart. It was the second, higher-pitched laugh that echoed it. Pushing open the heavy oak door, she saw him, Jerome Davenport. Her Jerome, with his hand tracing the spine of a woman in a crimson dress. A woman who was most certainly not his expectant wife. The world didn't just stop. It fractured into a million silent, screaming pieces. The Davenport name was etched into the very fabric of the city. It adorned the university's library, the downtown symphony hall, and the pediatric wing of the main hospital. To marry into the Davenport family was to ascend into a modern-day aristocracy, a world of silent service, inherited jewels, and unspoken rules. Celestine Duval, an art historian with a quiet grace and a genuine love for Jerome, had thought she'd navigated this world successfully. Their marriage had been the event of the season 2 years prior. Jerome was the consummate heir, impeccably handsome, devastatingly charming, and with a mind for business that had already doubled the family's shipping and logistics empire. He had pursued Celestine with a relentless, focused passion that had left her breathless. He'd loved her intellect. He'd said her calm spirit in a world of sharks. He had promised her a partnership, a life built on mutual respect and unwavering love. Now standing in the doorway of the study that promise lay in ruins at her feet. The woman Bianca Reed didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Her eyes, a sharp, knowing blue, met Celestine's over the rim of a champagne flute. A smirk played on her perfectly painted lips. She was stunning in that predatory way. Some women are all sharp angles and flawless skin. Jerome finally turned his expression, not of guilt, but of mild irritation, as if Celestine were a servant who had interrupted a private meeting. "Celestine," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. He didn't move away from Bianca. "I didn't expect you back from your doctor's appointment so soon." The clinical coldness of his tone was a physical blow. Her hand flew instinctively to the gentle swell of her belly, the tiny life she had been so excited to tell him about. They had just confirmed it was a boy, their heir. "Who is this Jerome?" Celestine's voice was a fragile whisper, threatening to break. "This is Bianca Reed," he said, his hand finally dropping from Bianca's back to rest on the mahogany desk. "A business associate." Bianca let out a small, condescending laugh. "Oh, darling, don't be so dull. We're a bit more than associates." She extended a hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "It's a pleasure to finally meet the woman of the house. I've heard so little about you." The insult was deliberate, a perfectly aimed dart. Celestine's world tilted. The study, usually a place of comfort with its leather-bound books and the scent of her husband's cologne, suddenly felt like a cage. "Get her out of our house," Celestine said, finding a sliver of steel in her voice. Jerome's face hardened. The charming mask slipped, revealing the cold, calculating man who ran Davenport Logistics. "No," he said simply. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean Bianca is my guest. She will be staying here." He walked toward Celestine, stopping just short of her. His eyes, the same warm brown that had once looked at her with such adoration, were now glacial. "Things are changing, Celestine. You need to adapt. Adapt. Adapt to my husband, bringing his mistress into our home. Into the home where I am carrying his son." The words tumbled out, laced with disbelief and a rising tide of horror. "It's not just our home, is it? It's the Davenport mansion. It has belonged to my family for generations, and I am the head of this family now." He stated, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Bianca understands the demands of my position. She supports me in a way you, with your books and your quiet little hobbies, simply cannot." Each word was a meticulously crafted cruelty. He was devaluing their entire life together, reframing her quiet strength as a weakness. It was then that Genevieve Davenport, Jerome's mother, swept into the room. A woman carved from ice and iron, she surveyed the scene with an unreadable expression. Her eyes flickered from Celestine's tear-streaked face to the defiant smirk on Bianca's, and landed finally on her son. "Jerome," Genevieve said, her voice a low, commanding hum. "What is the meaning of this scene, Mother?" Jerome said, his tone respectful but firm. "I am handling a private matter. It ceases to be private when it plays out in the main study for all the staff to gossip about," she retorted, her gaze finally settling on Celestine with a look of profound disappointment. "Celestine, you are overwrought. Perhaps you should go to your room and rest." It was a dismissal, not a suggestion. In that moment, Celestine understood. This wasn't a secret. Genevieve knew. She approved. Celestine was being replaced not just in her husband's bed, but in the family itself. Bianca was the new, sleek, more suitable model. "No," Celestine said, her voice shaking but resolute. She looked directly at her husband. "If she is staying in this house, then I am not." Jerome's expression didn't change. There was no flicker of remorse, no plea for her to reconsider. There was only a cold, terrifying finality. "As you wish," he said. "The driver can take you wherever you'd like. I'll have your things sent along." He turned his back on her, his pregnant wife, and poured another glass of champagne for his mistress. The pop of the cork was the sound of her old life ending. As Celestine walked out of the study, out of the mansion, and into the cold, unforgiving rain that had begun to fall, she felt the first stirrings of something beyond heartbreak, a cold, hard knot of fury. They had underestimated her. They saw her as a quiet, disposable wife. They had no idea who she was about to become. The pristine, silent world of the Davenport mansion was replaced by the cramped, noisy reality of her old friend Anna's two-bedroom apartment. The smell of lemon polish was gone, replaced by the scent of Anna's garlic-heavy cooking and the faint aroma of the city rising from the street below. For 3 weeks, Celestine existed in a fog of grief. She went through the motions eating when Anna put food in front of her, sleeping. When exhaustion claimed her, and holding her belly as if to shield her unborn son from the wreckage of his father's betrayal. The boxes Jerome had promised arrived unceremoniously, dropped in the building's lobby by a courier who didn't even ask for a signature. They were a curated collection of her life, her clothes, her personal books, a few pieces of jewelry he deemed unimportant enough to part with. It was a cold, efficient amputation. One rainy afternoon while Anna was at work, Celestine finally found the strength to sort through the last box. It contained sentimental items, things she'd kept from her own family, and gifts received over the years. At the bottom, wrapped in faded velvet, was a small, ornate music box. It was a gift from the late Gregory Davenport, Jerome's father, given to her on her wedding day. Gregory had been a formidable but kind man, with eyes that saw more than he let on. He had pulled her aside at the bustling reception, his voice a low rumble. "Jerome is a complex man. Celestine," he had said, pressing the box into her hands. "He has his mother's ambition but lacks my perspective. This family isn't just about power. It's about legacy. Real legacy. Protect it. And protect yourself." At the time, she'd thought it was a cryptic but well-intentioned blessing. Now his words felt like a premonition. She ran her fingers over the inlaid mother-of-pearl. She hadn't opened it in months. Winding the small key, she listened as the delicate, tinny notes of a Brahms lullaby filled the quiet apartment. It was the song her own mother used to sing to her. Gregory had remembered her mentioning it once. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought a fresh wave of tears. As the music slowed to a stop, she noticed something she never had before. A tiny, almost invisible seam along the bottom edge of the velvet lining. Her fingers, nimble from years of handling delicate historical artifacts, picked at the thread. It came loose, revealing that the bottom was a false one. Her heart began to pound, a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Beneath the velvet lay a small, hollowed-out compartment. Inside were 2 items, a slim sealed envelope made of heavy cream-colored vellum, and a small, modern USB flash drive. Her hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. Her name, Celestine Duval Davenport, was written on the front in Gregory's familiar, elegant script. Breaking the wax seal, she unfolded a single sheet of paper. It was a letter dated just 1 month before his death from a sudden heart attack a year ago. "My dearest Celestine, if you are reading this, it means my worst fears have been realized. It means Jerome has shown his true nature, a nature I have seen fostered and encouraged by his mother, Genevieve, for his entire life. I apologize for the deception you are about to uncover, but it was the only way I could see to protect the true legacy of the Davenport family. A legacy not of ruthless acquisition, but of integrity and strength, qualities I have seen in you from the moment we met. The Davenport Trust, the very heart of our family's fortune, is not as straightforward as Jerome believes. It is bound by a secret codicil I created years ago, a document known only to myself and my most trusted attorney, Lawrence Adler. It is called the matrilineal proviso. It states that full control and inheritance of the trust's primary assets can only pass to a direct biological descendant who also carries the bloodline of a specific maternal ancestor, a woman of great character who was the true founder of our family's initial wealth. Celestine. My son Jerome cannot fulfill this requirement. He is not my biological son. The words leaped off the page, searing themselves into her mind. Not my biological son. The room spun. Jerome, the proud heir, the man who defined himself by his lineage, was a fraud. The letter continued. He was adopted. Genevieve and I were unable to have children. It was a secret we guarded fiercely. She became obsessed with molding him into the perfect Davenport heir, instilling in him a ruthlessness I came to despise. He believes he is a Davenport by blood, and this belief is the source of his arrogance. The matrilineal proviso was my safeguard, my way of ensuring that the person who would one day lead this family would be chosen by character, not just by name. The enclosed flash drive contains all the necessary proof, a copy of the official adoption papers, my sworn affidavit, and a day test I had performed years ago comparing my DNA to Jerome's. It also contains the original digital scan of the proviso, the physical copy of which is held in a secure vault by Mr. Adler. The final clause of the proviso is the most important. It states that in the event my heir, Jerome, fails to produce a legitimate biological child who meets the matrilineal requirement control of the trust, defaults to the spouse of said heir, provided she is carrying a child who is a direct descendant of the specified maternal line. Celestine. Your own great-grandmother was a descendant of that same ancestral line. This is not a coincidence. I researched your lineage before I ever gave Jerome my blessing. Your child, your son or daughter, is the only person on this earth who can legitimately inherit the Davenport Trust. Your son is not just an heir, Celestine. He is the only heir. Use this knowledge wisely. Lawrence Adler is a good man. His number is in the drive's contact file. He will help you. Do not let them take what is rightfully your child's. Be the guardian of the legacy I know you can be. With deepest respect and hope, Gregory Davenport, Celestine sat back, the letter trembling in her hand. The air in the room seemed to crackle with the magnitude of what she held. It wasn't just leverage against a cheating husband. It was a key, a weapon, a crown. Jerome hadn't just pushed her out. He had pushed out the mother of the one person who held the entire Davenport empire in his tiny, unborn hands. The fury that had been simmering within her now ignited into a blazing inferno. This was no longer about a broken heart. This was about justice. It was about legacy. Gregory had entrusted her with his family's soul, and she would not fail him. The next morning, the grey fog of despair had been replaced by a sharp, crystalline focus. Celestine looked at her reflection in the mirror. The pale, grief-stricken woman of yesterday was gone. In her place was a woman with a purpose, her eyes holding a new steely glint. She was no longer just Celestine Duval, the spurned wife. She was the regent for the true Davenport heir. She plugged the USB drive into Anna's laptop. It was meticulously organized. There was the scanned copy of the matrilineal proviso, filled with dense legal language that made her head spin. But the core message was clear. There were Jerome's adoption papers from a private agency in a neighboring state dated 35 years ago. And then there was the DNA report, clinical and irrefutable, showing zero genetic match between Gregory and Jerome Davenport. It was an arsenal. She found the contact file. Lawrence Adler Esquire. His office was on the 55th floor of the most powerful corporate law firm in the city. Taking a deep breath, she dialed the number. Mr. Adler's office? The voice was crisp and professional. My name is Celestine Duval Davenport. I am calling on a matter of extreme importance regarding the late Gregory Davenport. He instructed me to contact Mr. Adler should the need arise. She used the exact phrasing Gregory had suggested in a small addendum to his letter. There was a brief pause on the other end. Please hold, Mrs. Davenport. A few moments later, a deep, calm voice came on the line. Mrs. Davenport, this is Lawrence Adler. I have been waiting for this call for over a year. How can I help you? An hour later, Celestine was sitting in a plush leather chair opposite Mr. Adler. He was a man in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that seemed to absorb everything without judgment. He had listened to her story without interruption, his expression unchanging as she detailed Jerome's affair, the humiliation at the mansion, and the discovery of the music box. When she finished, she slid the USB drive across the vast expanse of his polished desk. This is what Gregory left for me. Adler inserted the drive into his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. For 10 minutes, the only sound in the office was the soft clicking of keys and the distant hum of the city. He read every document, his brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, he leaned back, removing his glasses and polishing them with a silk handkerchief. It is all exactly as he described to me, Adler said, his voice resonating with a quiet authority. The matrilineal proviso is ironclad. Gregory was a brilliant man. He foresaw Jerome's potential for moral flexibility, let's call it. And he knew his wife's ambition was a dangerous engine. So it's true, my son. He inherits everything. Celestine asked, the reality of it still sinking in. Not just inherits, Adler corrected gently. According to the terms of the trust upon his birth, he becomes the primary beneficiary and controlling shareholder of Davenport Holdings. And until he comes of age, the sole executor and trustee with full voting power is you. The weight of his words was staggering. Full voting power, control, over the entire Davenport empire. Genevieve and Jerome believe he inherited everything upon Gregory's death, Celestine said. They believe what Gregory wanted them to believe, Adler explained. The public will and the corporate succession plan were a smokescreen. The real power, the core assets, the voting shares, they were all locked away in the trust. The trust Jerome believes he controls, but which in fact he has only been managing as a provisional steward, a steward whose term is about to expire. A plan began to form in Celestine's mind, sharp and clear. I don't want to just expose him, she said, her voice low and intense. I don't want a messy divorce or a settlement. I want to reclaim what belongs to my son. I want to do it in a way they will never forget. A slow smile spread across Lawrence Adler's face. I was hoping you'd say that, Mrs. Davenport. Gregory always said you had a spine of steel beneath that quiet demeanor. So what do you propose? They humiliated me in my own home, Celestine said. They tried to cast me aside like an old piece of furniture. It's only fitting that I reclaim my position in that very same place. Genevieve is hosting the annual Davenport Foundation charity gala at the mansion in 2 weeks. It's their biggest social event of the year. Everyone will be there, The board members, the investors, the city's elite. They'll be presenting Jerome and Bianca as the new power couple. Adler's eyes lit up. A public reclamation. Bold. I like it. But it will be a declaration of war. They declared war when they threw a pregnant woman out of her home. Celestine countered a cold fire in her eyes. We will not be making the first move. We will be making the last. In the 2 weeks until the gala, I want you to prepare everything. Every legal document, every injunction, every notification to the board. We will prepare for a siege. And on the night of the gala, we will walk into that mansion, and I will take back my house, my life, and my son's future. For the next 2 weeks, Anna's small apartment became a war room. Adler and a team of his most trusted junior associates worked around the clock. They prepared cease and desist orders, drafted memos to the board of Davenport Holdings, and filed preliminary injunctions to freeze Jerome's access to the trust's accounts, all timed to be executed at a precise moment. Celestine, meanwhile, underwent her own transformation. She studied the company's financials, learning every division, every asset, every liability. She read Gregory's old journals, which Adler provided, understanding his business philosophy, his regrets and his hopes for the future. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting to fulfill the last wish of the man who had believed in her. She also took care of herself and her baby. She ate well rested and talked to the little life growing inside her. We're going to be okay, Leo, she would whisper, her hand on her belly. She had decided on a name, Leo, for lion-hearted, and his middle name would be Gregory. Leo Gregory Duval. He would carry her name, the name of the true bloodline. On the evening of the gala, Celestine stood before the mirror. She was wearing a custom-made gown of deep emerald green, the color of money and new beginnings. It was elegant and powerful, accentuating her baby bump rather than hiding it. Her hair was styled in a sleek, commanding updo, and the only jewelry she wore was a simple diamond necklace, a gift from her own parents. She looked, she thought, with a grim satisfaction, like a queen about to take back her throne. Adler arrived dressed in a sharp tuxedo, a leather briefcase in his hand. "Are you ready, Mrs. Davenport?" "I am," she said, her voice steady. "Let's go home." The driveway of the Davenport mansion was lined with luxury cars, their headlights cutting through the manicured twilight. Music and the buzz of 100 conversations drifted from the open doors of the grand entrance. Valets in crisp uniforms scurried back and forth. It was the glittering heart of the city's high society, and tonight Jerome and Bianca were its sun and moon. Celestine's car, a discreet black town car driven by one of Adler's security personnel, bypassed the valet line and pulled directly up to the main steps. As she and Mr. Adler stepped out, a few heads turned, registering her presence with a flicker of surprise, before turning away, assuming she was a guest who had made a social blunder. A spurned wife did not show her face at her husband's triumphant party. She walked up the stone steps, her back straight, her gaze fixed on the entrance. The security guard at the door, a man named Titus, who had always been kind to her, moved to block her path. His expression a mixture of pity and discomfort. "Mrs. Davenport, I don't think you should be here," he stammered. Celestine met his gaze not with anger, but with unshakable authority. "I am not a guest, Peters. I am the lady of this house. Please step aside." Something in her tone, some new unbreakable core of strength made him hesitate. Before he could respond, Mr. Adler stepped forward. "This is a private legal matter. You will be held personally liable if you obstruct us, he said, his voice low and sharp. Peters, out of his depth, paled and moved aside. Celestine walked into the grand ballroom. The scene was exactly as she had pictured it. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. A string quartet played softly in the corner. And in the center of it all, near the grand staircase, stood Jerome, Bianca, and Genevieve. Jerome was holding court, a confident smile on his face, his arm possessively around Bianca's waist. Bianca was radiant in a dress of shimmering gold, soaking in the attention like a flower starved of sun. Genevieve stood beside them, a regal and approving presence, the architect of her son's new life. As Celestine and Adler stepped into the room, a ripple of silence began to spread from the entrance. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. The music seemed to thin. Jerome's smile froze on his face when he saw her. His eyes narrowed, a flash of pure fury crossing his features. Genevieve's expression turned to one of utter contempt. Bianca simply looked triumphant, as if Celestine's presence was the final confirmation of her victory. Celestine ignored the whispers, the stares, the palpable tension that had seized the room. She walked forward, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor, a sound that cut through the sudden silence. She did not stop until she was standing directly in front of the trio. "Celestine," Jerome hissed, his voice low, so only she could hear. "What in God's name do you think you're doing? I told you to stay away. Get out before you embarrass yourself further." "The only people who will be embarrassed tonight, Jerome, are you," Celestine replied, her voice calm and clear, yet loud enough for those nearby to hear. The circle of silence around them widened. She turned her gaze to Genevieve. "A lovely party, Genevieve. It's a shame you've held it under false pretenses." Genevieve's lips thinned into a bloodless line. "You have 5 seconds to leave this house before I have security throw you out." "Your security?" Celestine asked with a small, cold smile. "I don't think they'll be taking orders from you for much longer." She looked past them, raising her voice to address the assembled guests, many of whom were board members and key investors. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the interruption. My name is Celestine Duval, and I am here to reclaim what is mine." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Jerome stepped forward, his face a mask of rage. "She's hysterical," he announced to the room. "The divorce has been difficult for her. Please, everyone, pay her no mind." "There will be no divorce, Jerome," Celestine said, her voice ringing with authority. "Because you have nothing to offer me in a settlement. And this," she said, placing a protective hand on her stomach, "is not just your son. He is the sole legitimate heir to the entire Davenport Trust, which is more," she added, her eyes locking onto his, "than I can say for you." The gasp that went through the ballroom was a collective intake of breath. The accusation was so audacious, so unbelievable, that it stunned everyone into silence. Jerome laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "She's lost her mind. Absolutely mad. My father, Gregory Davenport, left everything to me." "Did he?" Mr. Adler said, stepping forward and opening his briefcase. "Because I, as Gregory Davenport's private attorney and the executor of his estate, can assure you all that he did not." The game was afoot. The stage was set. In the heart of her enemy's stronghold, surrounded by their allies, Celestine had just lit the fuse. The explosion was coming, and she was ready to stand in the center of it. The grand ballroom of the Davenport mansion had transformed from a stage for social triumph into a courtroom. The guests, once participants, were now a captive jury, their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and rapt fascination. "What is this nonsense, Adler?" Genevieve snapped, her icy composure finally cracking. "You were my husband's lawyer. Have you forgotten where your loyalties lie?" "On the contrary, Genevieve," Adler replied, his voice projecting easily across the silent room. "My loyalty has always been and remains to the last will and testament of my client, Gregory Davenport. The entire will, not just the parts you found convenient." He pulled a sheaf of documents from his briefcase. "Many of you on the board are familiar with the corporate succession plan Gregory laid out. What you are not aware of is the master document that governs it, the Davenport Family Trust. And the trust is governed by a very specific, legally binding codicil known as the matrilineal proviso." Adler began to explain the proviso in clear, simple terms. He spoke of the bloodline requirement, a secret lineage that Gregory had valued above all else. A low murmur went through the crowd as the implications began to sink in. Jerome, recovering from his initial shock, moved to regain control. "This is absurd, a fairy tale. My father would never create such a ridiculous clause. He built me up to take over his company. He trained me my entire life." "He trained you, yes," Adler conceded. "But he did not trust you. He saw the avarice your mother instilled in you, and he created a fail-safe." "Prove it," Jerome challenged, his voice laced with bravado. "Show me this fantasy document." "With pleasure," Adler said. He gestured to one of his associates, who was setting up a projector and screen at the side of the room. A moment later, a high-resolution scan of the matrilineal proviso, signed by Gregory and notarized by 2 judges, filled the screen. Adler used a laser pointer to highlight the key clause regarding the direct biological descendant, and then he delivered the killing blow. "A clause which you, Mr. Davenport, can never fulfill." He projected the next document. It was a copy of an official adoption certificate. The names were clear for all to see: Jerome Reed, adopted by Gregory and Genevieve Davenport. The collective gasp this time was sharp and visceral. All eyes flew to Jerome, whose face had drained of all color. He looked as if he'd been physically struck. "It's a forgery!" Genevieve shrieked, her voice thin and panicked. "A lie!" "Is it?" Adler asked calmly, clicking to the next slide. It was the DNA report, a simple stark chart showing no genetic markers shared between Gregory Davenport and Jerome. "Genetics, unlike people, do not lie, Genevieve." Jerome stared at the screen, then at his mother. His eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. "Mother, what is this? Tell me it's a lie." Genevieve couldn't meet his eyes. Her entire life's work, the decades spent molding her adopted son into a ruthless heir. The secret she had guarded with an iron will had just been laid bare for her entire world to see. Her carefully constructed reality was shattering around her. Bianca, who had been standing beside Jerome like a golden statue, took a subtle step away from him. Her sharp mind was clearly processing the new landscape. The billionaire heir she had attached herself to was nothing. A man with a famous name but no actual claim to the fortune. Her investment had just turned to dust. Celestine stepped forward again, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Gregory knew." She said her words directed at Jerome, but heard by everyone. "He knew you weren't his son, but he raised you as his own. He gave you every opportunity. He just couldn't trust you with his legacy. Not when you chose ambition over integrity." She then looked at the board members assembled in the crowd. "But he did trust in the future. The proviso has one final clause. It states that if the appointed heir is found to be illegitimate, and the spouse of that heir is carrying a child who does fulfill the bloodline requirement, full and immediate control of the trust passes to her as regent until the child comes of age. Adler projected one last document, a genealogical chart professionally prepared, tracing Celestine's own lineage back, showing the direct, unbroken maternal line that connected her to the Davenport founder. It was irrefutable. My son Leo Gregory Duval is the one and only true heir to the Davenport fortune. Celestine announced, her voice ringing with the force of absolute truth. And as his mother and his guardian, I am now the sole executor of the Davenport Trust. This means I control all voting shares of Davenport Holdings. She let that statement hang in the air, a declaration of absolute power. As my first act, she continued, her eyes sweeping over the silent, stunned faces, I am accepting Jerome Davenport's resignation from his position as CEO, effective immediately. The board will convene with me tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to discuss the transition. She then turned her gaze to Bianca, who was already trying to inch her way toward the exit. And you, Celestine said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. You are trespassing. I want you out of my house, now. Bianca flushed a mixture of fury and humiliation on her face. Without a word, she turned and practically fled from the ballroom, the whispers of the guests following her like a flock of birds. Finally, Celestine faced Jerome and Genevieve. Jerome was still reeling, staring at his mother with a look of utter betrayal. Genevieve, however, had gathered herself, her face a mask of pure hatred. You will not get away with this, Genevieve whispered, her voice venomous. This family is mine. You never understood, did you? Celestine replied, her voice filled with a strange sort of pity. It was never about you or Jerome, or even me. It was about legacy, a legacy of character, and you have none. She turned to the head of security. Peters, please escort Mr. Davenport and his mother from the premises. They are no longer residents here. Peters, who had watched the entire drama unfold with wide eyes, nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. He and another guard moved towards Jerome and Genevieve. For the first time, the staff of the mansion were taking their orders from her. The power shift was complete, and it was absolute. The aftermath of the gala was a quiet storm. As Jerome and a sputtering Genevieve were escorted out into the night, a profound silence fell over the remaining guests. The party was over. One by one, and in small whispering groups, the city's elite departed, leaving Celestine and Mr. Adler standing alone in the vast, suddenly silent ballroom. The staff began to clear the remnants of the party, their movements quiet and respectful. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, a woman who had worked at the mansion for 40 years and had been a confidant of Gregory's, approached Celestine, her eyes filled with tears. Mr. Gregory would be so proud of you, ma'am, she said, her voice thick with emotion. He always said you were the strongest of them all. In that moment, Celestine felt the full weight of her new reality settle upon her. She wasn't just a victor, she was a custodian. She had not just won a battle. She had inherited a kingdom and the responsibility that came with it. The days that followed were a blur of focused activity. The 9 a.m. board meeting was a tense but decisive affair, faced with the undeniable legality of the trust documents presented by Adler's firm, and the fact that Celestine now controlled 68% of the company's voting shares. The board had no choice but to ratify her position as interim chairwoman. Her calm demeanor, her intimate knowledge of the company's financials, thanks to her 2 weeks of intense study, and her clear vision for the future, a vision based on Gregory's principles of sustainable growth and ethical practice. Not Jerome's aggressive high-risk expansionism, quickly won over the more pragmatic members. Her orders were swift and precise. She initiated a full audit of the company's books, suspecting Jerome's tenure was rife with questionable deals. She froze all corporate accounts to which Jerome had personal access. She replaced the head of security with her own team and changed the locks on the mansion and the executive offices. She was fortifying her new domain. Genevieve stripped of her standing, and her home tried to fight back. She hired a team of ruthless lawyers to contest the proviso, claiming Gregory was not of sound mind when he created it. But Adler was always one step ahead. He produced sworn affidavits from Gregory's doctors, friends, and business partners, all attesting to his sharp intellect right up to his final day. The case was thrown out of court within a week. Genevieve's power built entirely on her connection to the Davenport name, and fortune had evaporated overnight. She was reduced to making furious, impotent phone calls that went unanswered. Jerome's fall was even more precipitous. He had lost everything in a single night: his name, his fortune, his career, his mistress, and his identity. The man who had been the master of his universe was now adrift. Bianca, true to her nature, had vanished. Her calls to Jerome went straight to voicemail. She was already scouting for her next benefactor. He tried to confront Celestine a few days later, showing up at the mansion gates and demanding to be let in. Celestine agreed to see him, but not in the grand ballroom or the study. She met him in the small, sunlit breakfast room, a neutral space filled with light. He looked haggard. The bespoke suit was crumpled, his face unshaven. The arrogant charm was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed desperation. "What do you want, Celestine?" he asked, his voice rough. "Money. Is that what this is about? A revenge check? Name your price." Celestine slowly sipped her herbal tea, looking at him not with hatred, but with a clinical detachment. "You still don't get it, do you? You think this is a transaction? This was never about money. It was about respect. It was about the vows you broke and the family you tried to destroy. That woman, my mother, she lied to me my entire life," he raged, looking for somewhere to place the blame. "Everything I am, everything I thought I was, is a lie." "Yes," Celestine agreed calmly. "It is. But you had a choice. Gregory gave you a good life, a name, an education. You could have chosen to be a good man. You chose to be a cruel one. You chose to bring that woman into our home to humiliate me while I was carrying your child. The lie you were told is your mother's sin. The man you became is your own. So what now?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You take everything, you leave me with nothing. I'm not leaving you with nothing." "Jerome," she replied, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. "I am leaving you with yourself. For the first time in your life, you will have to figure out who Jerome is without the Davenport name or the Davenport money propping you up." She slid a single envelope across the table. "This is a trust fund. It's not a fortune, but it's enough for you to start a new life somewhere else. It will pay for an apartment and living expenses for 1 year. After that, you're on your own. It's more than you deserve, but it's what Gregory in his better moments would have wanted. A chance for you to find some decency in yourself." He stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. His pride warred with his desperation. Finally, he snatched it from the table. "You think you've won?" he sneered, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. "This wasn't a game, Jerome," Celestine said, standing up, signaling the end of the conversation. "Goodbye." He left without another word. As Celestine watched him walk down the long driveway, a man stripped of his borrowed power, she felt no triumph, only a quiet, somber resolution. The past was finally being put to rest. The 3 months that followed the gala were a period of profound and quiet revolution. The Davenport mansion, which had once felt like a museum of opulent restraint, slowly began to breathe again under Celestine's command. The first change was the light. On her first morning as its undisputed mistress, she had walked through the cavernous halls and ordered the heavy, light-blocking velvet drapes chosen by Genevieve to preserve the antique furniture to be taken down. As sunlight streamed through the tall Palladian windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, it felt like the house itself was exhaling a long-held breath. Her leadership at Davenport Holdings began with that same clarity. The 9 a.m. board meeting had been a crucible. She entered the room not as a grieving widow or a vengeful ex-wife, but as the company's unshakable new center of gravity. The all-male board friends of Gregory and appointees of Jerome watched her with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. But she was prepared. Flanked by Mr. Adler, she didn't speak of betrayal or family drama. She spoke of numbers of logistics, of market projections and fiduciary duty. She laid out the initial findings of the immediate freeze on Jerome's executive accounts, pointing to irregularities that suggested not just mismanagement, but active embezzlement. Jerome ran this company on arrogance and high-risk gambles. She stated her voice even and steady. I intend to run it on the principles my father-in-law valued: stability, integrity, and sustainable growth. When one of the older board members condescendingly suggested she appoint a more experienced CEO and take a comfortable seat as a silent partner, she met his gaze without flinching. The time for silent partners is over, Mr. Henderson. I am the controlling shareholder, and I will be the acting chairwoman. My experience is in recognizing value and protecting it. That is precisely what I intend to do for this company. Her sheer competence and unwavering resolve silenced them. Respect, she learned quickly, was not given. It was seized. The full audit she commissioned was a hornet's nest. It uncovered a web of shell corporations and back-channel deals Jerome had used to line his own pockets. Celestine pursued the reclamation of these funds with a surgeon's precision, not with loud vengeance. Her actions were decisive, legal, and devastatingly effective. She dismantled Jerome's corrupt infrastructure and promoted deserving talent from within the company, earning the fierce loyalty of those who had been overlooked for years. The ghosts of her old life were exorcised with similar efficiency. Genevieve's legal challenges crumbled into dust against the iron wall of Adler's preparedness. Stripped of her social standing and financial power, she became a non-entity, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. Celestine established a modest trust in Genevieve's name, enough for a quiet, comfortable life, but a gilded cage nonetheless. It was a final dispassionate act of severance, devoid of either pity or malice. As for Jerome, he had vanished into the anonymity she had purchased for him. He made no further attempts to contact her. He was a chapter closed, a man erased by his own actions, left to wrestle with the hollow reality of who he was, without the name he had never truly owned. While one part of Celestine's life was about corporate warfare and consolidation of power, the other more significant part was a gentle inward journey. As her belly grew, the mansion's transformation mirrored her own. A wing of the house that had been a repository for forgotten art was converted into a bright, airy nursery. The scent of lemon polish and old regret was replaced by the faint aroma of fresh paint and new beginnings. She spent her evenings not poring over financial reports, but walking through the blooming rose gardens, one hand on her stomach, speaking softly to the child within. She told him about the stars, about the kindness of his grandfather Gregory, and about the strength of the bloodline he carried. This child was not just her son. He was her purpose, the living embodiment of the legacy she had fought to save. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves drifted past the windows of her study, she went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, but Celestine met the pain with the same focused determination she had brought to the boardroom. And then, in the quiet, sterile environment of the hospital's best suite, the world fell away. The moment the nurse placed her son in her arms, all the fight, the anger, and the strategy dissolved into a wave of love so profound, it was breathtaking. He was perfect. He had a dusting of dark hair and a small, determined mouth. When he opened his eyes, they were her eyes, calm, intelligent, and full of a deep old soul. She named him Leo Gregory Duval. Leo, for his lion-hearted strength. Gregory for the man who had trusted her. And Duval for the lineage that was his true and rightful inheritance. A week later, she was back in the study. The room had been her command center, but now it was something more. Beside the sleek monitor displaying stock market data, a small silver frame held a photograph of baby Leo wrapped in a soft blue blanket. She was on a conference call, her voice calm and authoritative, as she discussed a new philanthropic initiative to fund arts education in underprivileged city schools. Mrs. Gable, who had become Celestine's quiet confidant, entered without a sound and placed a cup of chamomile tea at her elbow. As Celestine concluded the call, the housekeeper smiled, her gaze drifting to the baby monitor on the desk, from which a soft cooing could be heard. "He has his great-grandfather's spirit, you know," Mrs. Gable said, her voice filled with a gentle warmth. "A powerful presence, even when he's small. Mr. Gregory would have been utterly besotted with him." "I hope I can do right by both of them," Celestine replied, her hand instinctively going to the silver frame. She looked around the room at the empire she now commanded, at the sunlight glinting off the photograph of her son. Her journey had been a trial by fire. She had walked into this family, an unassuming art historian, been cast out as a scorned victim, and had been forced to return as a warrior. But now, sitting in the quiet hum of her reclaimed life, she felt the truth. She was not a warrior anymore. She was a guardian, a mother, a queen. Her reign would not be one of ruthless ambition like Jerome's, nor of cold social maneuvering like Genevieve's. It would be a reign of wisdom, of integrity, and of fierce protective love. She had not just taken back a house. She had built a home, ready to foster a new and better legacy on the foundations of the old. The future of the Davenport name and the Duval bloodline was finally truly safe. And so Celestine Duval's story isn't just one of a marriage ending. It's the story of a woman finding her own immense power in the ashes of betrayal. She turned the deepest heartbreak of her life into her greatest strength, proving that true legacy isn't about the name you carry, but the character you build. She faced down her tormentors, not with screaming or crying, but with intelligence, strategy, and an unbreakable will to protect her child. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the quietest people have the strongest resolve, and that justice, when it finally comes, can reshape an entire world. What do you think of Celestine's final decision regarding Jerome? Was she too lenient, or did she handle it with perfect grace? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of resilience and ultimate triumph, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves a story of strength overcoming deceit. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another tale of real-life drama and incredible twists. Thank you for listening.